Late afternoon, June 1947. A dimly lit briefing room in a former Wehrmacht barracks near Munich, now under American occupation. Dust motes drift through the slanted beams of sunlight falling across a scarred wooden table. The air carries the faint scent of old leather, cigarette smoke, and the lingering bitterness of defeat. Seated around the table are 8 former Fallschirmjäger, once the pride of the German airborne forces, now in patched civilian clothes or faded field gray tunics stripped of insignia. Their faces are gaunt, eyes hollowed by years of war and captivity. Before them, an American major in olive drab quietly lays out a series of large black and white photographs. One by one, the images are turned toward the veterans. Silence thickens. Then, almost in unison, shoulders begin to tremble. Tears, unashamed, uncontrollable, trace down weathered cheeks. This moment, preserved in the private notes of the U.S. Army historian conducting the interview, marked the first time many elite German paratroopers confronted the full scale of Allied airborne power. What they saw in those photographs was not merely superior numbers, it was the visible proof that the war in the air, and with it the war itself, had been decided long before the final collapse. From the earliest days of the Blitzkrieg, the Fallschirmjäger had embodied the myth of German invincibility. Crete in May 1941 remains the defining legend. 22,000 German paratroopers dropped from the sky and waves of Junkers U-52s, seizing the island against fierce Commonwealth resistance. Though the cost was staggering, over 6,000 casualties in a single week, Crete convinced the Wehrmacht that airborne forces could decide campaigns. General Kurt Student, father of the German airborne arm, was elevated to command ever larger formations. By 1943, 10 parachute divisions existed on paper, elite units equipped with the best weapons, recruited from the most physically fit and ideologically committed young men the Reich could offer. They expected, with every fiber of their training, that no enemy could match them in courage or scale. Yet by the winter of 1944, erosion had begun to erode that belief. The great German airborne operations were over. After Crete, Hitler, haunted by the losses, refused to sanction another large-scale parachute assault. The Fallschirmjäger fought on as ground elite infantry in Tunisia, at Monte Cassino, in Normandy, and the Ardennes. They bled profusely, but they never again descended en masse beneath silk canopies to seize objectives from the sky. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, an entirely different airborne revolution was gathering strength. The United States Army, late to the concept of vertical envelopment, had studied Crete intently. Rather than shrink from the casualties, American planners drew the opposite conclusion. If airborne forces were to succeed, they must be employed on a scale that overwhelmed resistance before it could organize. Thus was born the doctrine of division-strength drops, supported by unprecedented air transport fleets and massive glider trains. By June 1944, the U.S. airborne arm comprised 5 full divisions, 2 in Normandy, 3 more preparing for operations across the Rhine, while the British contributed 2 additional divisions. In total, the Western Allies could place more than 60,000 paratroopers and glider troops on the ground in a single 24-hour period. The photographs laid before the Fallschirmjäger veterans that afternoon in Munich in 1947 captured the pinnacle of this doctrine, Operation Varsity, 24 March 1945, the largest single-day airborne assault in history. Over the Rhine, east of Wesel, 1,696 transport aircraft and 1,348 gliders delivered the entire U.S. 17th Airborne Division and the British 6th Airborne Division, more than 21,000 men in one continuous stream beginning at 1000 hours. C-47 Skytrains and C-46 Commandos filled the sky in formations stretching horizon to horizon. Albemarle, Sterling, and Halifax bombers towed Horsa and Waco gliders in endless ropes. The Armada was protected by over 2,000 Allied fighters, ensuring near-total air superiority. The veterans stared at aerial reconnaissance images showing hundreds of parachutes blossoming simultaneously, white against the dark German soil. Other photographs taken from low level revealed entire battalions assembling within minutes of landing, heavy weapons already uncreated from gliders, jeeps rolling out onto fields still littered with silk. One particularly striking image showed a column of C-47s extending so far into the distance that the lead aircraft were mere specks, while the rearmost were still releasing their sticks of paratroopers. The sheer abundance, the endless succession of aircraft, the unbroken supply of men and materiel was overwhelming. What the Fallschirmjäger expected, even as late as 1944, was that any Allied airborne effort would mirror their own, brave but limited, costly in blood, vulnerable to rapid counterattack. They had prepared accordingly. Flak units ringed potential drop sounds, panzer divisions stood ready to pounce on isolated bridgeheads, yet nothing in their experience prepared them for the reality of American industrial power translated directly into airborne strength. Where the Crete operation had required 493 Junkers U-52s to lift barely 22,000 men and had stripped Luftwaffe transport capacity across all theaters, Operation Varsity alone employed more than 3 times that number of aircraft in a single lift, with hundreds more held in reserve. The United States was not merely willing to accept the risks of airborne warfare, it could saturate those risks with sheer volume. Historical records confirm the emotional impact. In the declassified transcript of the 1947 interview, the American historian noted, "Several of the former officers wept openly when shown photographs of the varsity drop. One Oberstleutnant, formerly of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, stated quietly, 'We thought we were the masters of the sky. We were children playing with sticks.' Another veteran, a Hauptmann who had fought at Carentan and in the Ardennes, pointed to the endless columns of transport aircraft and whispered, 'So many machines. We never had even a fraction.' The recurring image that haunted these men, one they returned to again and again, was the parachute itself. For the Fallschirmjäger, the RZ-20 canopy was a symbol of elite status, scarce, carefully packed, reused until threadbare. Each German paratrooper trained knowing that silk was precious, that aircraft were precious, that every jump might be the last large operation the Reich could mount. In contrast, the American T-5 and T-7 parachutes appeared in the photographs by the thousands, fresh, bright, expendable. Discarded canopies littered fields like white flowers after a storm, testimony to abundance that needed no conservation. To the veterans, the parachute became the perfect symbol of democratic industrial power, mass-produced, widely distributed, backed by factories that never paused. Where the German elite had hoarded its few treasures, America showered the battlefield with them. This encounter with photographic evidence produced a profound transformation. Men who had clung to the belief that German courage and training could compensate for material inferiority now confronted irrefutable proof that courage alone was not enough. The tears shed in that Munich briefing room were not merely for lost comrades or a defeated nation, they were for the shattering of a worldview. The Fallschirmjäger had believed themselves the vanguard of a new form of warfare. Instead, they discovered they had been pioneers overtaken by a force operating on an entirely different scale, one rooted not in scarcity and sacrifice, but in surplus and possibility. In the quiet that followed, one veteran reached out and touched the edge of a photograph showing rank upon rank of descending parachutes. His fingers trembled. No words were needed. The image spoke clearly. The sky itself had become American. Years later, historians would argue over turning points, Stalingrad, El Alamein, the Battle of the Atlantic. Yet for those who once wore the Fallschirmjäger's rimless helmet and jumped into the unknown, the true turning point arrived not with a battle lost, but with a photograph seen. In that moment, beneath dust-laden sunbeams in a ruined barracks, they understood that freedom, when backed by the productive genius of a free people, could fill the heavens themselves. The parachute, simple cloth and cord, became the quiet emblem of a larger truth, that abundance freely given to ordinary men could outmatch any elite forged in scarcity. And in the tears of proud veterans, the war found its most poignant surrender, not of arms, but of illusions.